This program is supported by Protect Plus Gold, a broad-spectrum disinfectant, kills 99.9% of disease-causing germs and works in 10 minutes.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International.
And I'm CJ Hero. Welcome to the program. On tonight's headlines.
The Philippines will send black boxes of a Lockheed C-130 aircraft that crashed at the weekend to the United States for analysis.
After battering Cuba with drenching rain
Elsa.
and strong winds, Elsa regained hurricane strength late Tuesday as it closed in on Florida.
Indonesia expanded its nationwide restrictions as it reported a record number of coronavirus deaths.
And last month was the hottest June on record in North America, stoked by a deadly heat wave searing across parts of the region. The European Union's Climate Monitoring Service reported, saying it illustrates the impacts of global warming.
First, here in the country, the Philippines will send the black boxes of the Lockheed C-130 aircraft that crashed at the weekend to the United States for analysis. The CVR records flight crew conversations, and the flight data recorder holds the information about the speed, altitude, and direction of the plane. And they could explain what caused the C-130, which the military said was in very good condition, to crash in sunny weather. According to a Reuters report, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin offered additional support to Philippine counterpart Delfin Lorenzana when they spoke by phone on Tuesday to discuss the crash. They also discussed critical medical evacuation support provided by U.S. personnel and other possible assistance, including victim identification, according to a statement released in Washington. The C-130 was carrying 96 people, mostly fresh Army graduates, when it overshot the runway on Sunday while trying to land on Jolo Island in the southern Sulu province. Now, most of the dead were soldiers being deployed to the island, a haven for Islamist militants, as part of a counter-insurgency effort.
In a related news, the Armed Forces of the Philippines clarified that the death toll in the crash of that C-130 cargo plane in Paticul, Sulu stands at 49. In a statement, AFP Chief General Cirilito Sobejana said this corrects previous reports of 50 military fatalities in the incident, citing that there had been a case of double count. This is a very hard task since the cadavers were beyond recognition, but we have experts supporting our effort, he said. We are doing our best to expedite the identification and the ongoing investigation without compromising its credibility, Sobejana said. He meanwhile asked for the public's understanding as investigating teams have yet to gather more pieces of evidence to find out the circumstances of the crash. Sobejana said 30 more cadavers, which are still in Zamboanga City, have yet to be identified.
In other news, a search team found the remains of 19 people Wednesday after a passenger plane crashed in Russia's remote Far Eastern Kamchatka Peninsula, and the governor promised relatives all necessary help. Governor Vladimir Solodov declared a 3-day mourning period beginning Wednesday and said that the families of the victims would receive 3.5 million rubles or $47,000. Let's listen in.
Наша задача, чтобы в этой тяжелой ситуации не остались один на один ни одна семья пассажиров самолета, который потерпел крушение здесь, возле Паланы. Выплаты, по которым решение принято, в объеме до 3,5 миллионов рублей на человека, будут также обеспечиваться максимально быстро.
The AN-26 plane flying from Kamchatka's main city of Petropavlovsk, Kamchatsky, to the coastal town of Palana with 28 people on board disappeared and crashed on Tuesday. Search teams later found wreckage of the plane near Palana after it was believed to have flown into a cliff. The 28 people on board included 6 crew and 22 passengers, including 2 minors. All were presumed dead. More than 50 people combed the coast of the Okhotsk Sea, according to officials. The search operation, complicated by fog, strong winds and waves, was halted for the night. Kamchatka is a vast peninsula, popular with adventure tourists for its abundant wildlife, live volcanoes, and black sand beaches. In a telegram to the Kamchatka governor, President Vladimir Putin expressed his condolences. An official said the plane, built in 1982, was in good condition and passed safety checks. Russia's investigative committee, which probes major crimes and incidents, said it was looking at 3 potential causes of the accident: poor weather conditions, technical malfunctions, or pilot error.
And this just in, Haiti President Jovenel Moise was assassinated and his wife wounded in an attack at their home. The interim prime minister announced an act that risks further destabilizing the Caribbean nation beset by gang violence and political volatility. Claude Joseph said he was now in charge of the country and urged the public to remain calm while insisting the police and army would ensure the population's safety. Moise had ruled Haiti the poorest country in the Americas by decree after legislative elections due in 2018 were delayed in the wake of disputes, including on when his own term ends. In addition to the political crisis, kidnappings for ransom have surged in recent months, reflecting the growing influence of armed gangs in the Caribbean nation. Haiti also faces chronic poverty and recurrent natural disasters. The president faced steep opposition from swathes of the population that deemed his mandate illegitimate, and he churned through a series of 7 prime ministers in 4 years. Most recently, Joseph was supposed to be replaced by, this week, after only 3 months in the post. As well as presidential, legislative, and local elections, Haiti was due to have a constitutional referendum in September after it was twice postponed due to the coronavirus pandemic. The United States condemned the killings as horrific and said it was ready to assist in any investigation.
Back here in the country, the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology Director Renato Solidum Jr. said at least 5 phreatomagmatic bursts were recorded in the Taal volcano on Wednesday. And he said these were all short-lived phreatomagmatic eruptions lasting from 1 to 7 minutes. The first 2 eruptions both produced 300 meters of grayish column, while the third eruption generated a 700-meter-high dark gray column. The fourth and fifth eruptions produced dark gray column, 500 meters and 200 meters in height, respectively. Mr. Solidum said that small phreatomagmatic eruption, together with the continued emission of high amounts of sulfur dioxide and the increasing number of earthquakes, indicate a continued magmatic activity that may lead to larger explosions or phreatomagmatic eruptions. 55 volcanic earthquakes caused by movements or eruptions of magma from the volcano, and SO2 emission that averaged 7,560 tons per day were recorded in Taal for the past 24 hours. Alert level 3 is maintained over the Taal volcano, and this means that magma extruding from the main crater could drive explosive eruptions.
In other news, after battering Cuba with drenching rain and strong winds, Elsa regained hurricane strength late Tuesday as it closed in on Florida, where rescue workers pressed on with their search of the debris of a Miami condominium that collapsed almost 2 weeks ago. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis added several counties in the First Coast region to the list of areas under a state of emergency ahead of Hurricane Elsa. Take a listen.
Well, good evening. Elsa has strengthened. Maximum sustained winds now estimated to be 70 miles per hour, and there are potential for higher gusts. The center is currently 90 miles southwest of Fort Myers. It's slowed, so it's now moving north at about 9 miles an hour. Earlier today, the National Hurricane Center issued a hurricane warning for a portion of the west coast of Florida to reflect the increased strength. Elsa is forecast to become a hurricane before making landfall, with landfall appearing most likely in the eastern Big Bend of Florida or Nature Coast north of Tampa Bay tomorrow morning. But of course, if you look at how lopsided this storm is, anything to the east of the eye will have some storm impacts for sure. So the total counties under state of emergency are now at 33. The state EOC here has moved to a level 1, so that's 24-hour operations.
With a possible storm surge of up to 5 feet, Tampa Airport suspended commercial flights from 5 p.m. Tuesday until at least 10 a.m. Wednesday. Florida Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunez called on state residents to start preparing for the storm, including the possibility of power blackouts, and asked people to stockpile adequate supplies of food and water. Elsa left a trail of destruction through the Caribbean, claiming at least 3 lives. It was logged as the first hurricane of this year's Atlantic season on Friday, before being downgraded Saturday to a tropical storm again, and then back up to a hurricane Tuesday.
Meanwhile, rescuers are still combing through the debris of a deadly condo tower collapse in Florida, as Tropical Storm Elsa threatened to complicate the delicate search mission with strong winds and heavy rain. The death toll from the June 24 disaster in Surfside, a town north of Miami Beach, rose. Here's Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava.
And throughout the team's ongoing hard work today, despite the rain and the other adverse conditions, we have recovered 4 additional victims. The number of confirmed deaths is now 36, with 29 of those identified. 191 are accounted for, and now 109 reports of people who are potentially unaccounted for, which we are continuing to review.
As mentioned earlier, the authorities are warning residents to prepare for storm surge and possible power outages. But Surfside and the Miami area on the east coast of the state appear to have avoided the brunt of the storm. Surfside Mayor Charles Burkett said the weather was impacting the search of the debris from the building known as Champlain Tower South. No survivors have been found since the day of the collapse. A 2018 report released by city officials revealed fears of major structural damage in the complex, from the concrete slab under the pool deck to columns and beams in the parking garage. In a letter to residents in April, Jean Wodniczki, chair of the Condo Association, described accelerating damage to the 40-year-old building since then, and repairs had been set to begin soon.
Meanwhile, streets are devastated in the town of Atami in Japan, where rescue workers are on the move. 4 people are presumed dead, and around several others are still missing after a mudslide was triggered by torrential rains in central Japan. Take a look.
そしてこの太い電線がね、すごく揺れたんですね。何かなと思ったら、もうそこまで土石流が来てて、でこの下を見ましたら、もうすでにここにも来てて、もう本当に怖かったです。
Torrents of mud crashed through part of the town on Saturday morning, following days of heavy rain, sweeping away hillside homes and turning residential areas into a quagmire that stretched down to the nearby coast. Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga told reporters that rescue workers are doing their utmost to rescue those who may be buried under the mud and waiting for help as soon as possible. 3 Coast Guard ships and 6 military drones were backing up hundreds of troops, firefighters, and others toiling in the rain and fog. Torrents of mud crashed through that part of the town on Saturday morning.
Meanwhile, rain and hail poured down in Oman's northern Al Daira or Dahira governorate during heavy thunderstorms. Let's take a look.
Month was the hottest June on record in North America, stoked by a deadly heat wave searing across parts of the region. The European Union's Climate Monitoring Service reported, saying it illustrates the impacts of global warming. Record-breaking heat scorched from the southwest to the northwest of the United States and into Canada, where the all-time record daily temperature was broken 3 days in a row in British Columbia. The region was 1.2 degrees Celsius above the 1991 to 2021 average in June, according to the Copernicus Climate Change Service, or C3S. These heat waves are not happening in a vacuum. They are happening in a global climate environment that is warming and which makes them more likely to occur, said C3S climate scientist Julian Nicholas. Globally, June 2021 joins the same month in 2018 as the fourth warmest June. It was the second warmest June on record for Europe, while northern Siberia also saw extremely high summer temperatures. It is already well understood that heat waves are occurring more frequently, are more intense, and are lasting longer than they did in the past, according to Nicholas. The regions affected also had unusually dry soils, according to a report from C3S, which noted that both wildfires and heat pose threats to life. Dozens of fires have ripped across parts of Canada in recent days, fueled by the deadly heat wave and tinder-dry conditions.
In other news, the U.S. military confirmed that it didn't give Afghan officials the precise time troops would abandon the strategic Bagram air base for security reasons. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby said senior Afghan political and military officials were told about the exit 2 days ahead and were given a walkthrough of the sprawling base. Take a look.
It was a turnover, just like the previous 6 bases were turned over. And so there were turnover discussions with Afghan leaders. I can't speak for every conversation that happened. I certainly can't give you an exact day on the calendar that was provided. But as I said, some 48 hours before, there were ample discussions about the turnover of the base. Not being able to specifically provide the hour or hours of departure. Again, I think you would all understand why we would do it that way. It's not a statement about whether we trust or don't trust our Afghan partners. It's a statement of the fact that we have to consider that this drawdown could be contested.
It's not just a symbolic, but strategically, it's a reality. It's a very important, as we heard something, Taliban take this place as a golden place for themselves, and they try to get that area, but it's for us it's also important. You know, if we compare ourselves with the American, there's a big difference. We cannot say just what we will continue, and we were that much powerful that the U.S. Army was before on that base. But according to our capabilities and our, sources, we are trying to do the best and as much as possible secure and serve all the people.
Meanwhile, the Taliban had already launched a major assault on a provincial capital in Afghanistan today, the first since the U.S. military began its final drawdown of troops from the country as insurgents press on with a blistering offensive. Fierce fighting erupted in the western city of Kalainau, the capital of Badghis, with the militant seizing police headquarters and office of the country's spy agency. The onslaught came hours after Washington announced U.S. forces had completed more than 90% of their withdrawal from Afghanistan, and as the Kabul government held talks with Taliban representatives in neighboring Iran. If the Taliban capture Kalainau, it will be of strategic value as it creates a psychological effect of Afghan forces rapidly losing territory like dominoes against an unstoppable force, that according to Afghanistan expert Nishank Motwani. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
This portion is brought to you by North Luzon Express Terminal.
Nung sumali po kami ng PME, mas lalong nagbago yung buhay po namin.
Nagbuhayan kami ng pag-asa na makasaya ulit ng sama-sama.
Gagawin namin yung best namin para makulong.
Lahat itatry namin para talaga makamit yung mga pangarap namin.
Ito na yung pangarap namin. Lalaban namin to.
This program is supported by Magnolia Incorporated. Magnolia ready-to-cook fried chicken. Worry-free na on your next family meal. Yan ang alagang Magnolia. Pure Food Standard Juicy Hot Dog. Walang duda, kids can tell na #1 ang Pure Food Standard Juicy Hot Dog. Sandig Sugar-Free White Coffee. Sarap ng white coffee, now sugar-free. B-Mag Premium and Protect Plus Gold. SMC Infrastructure and Skyway Stage 3 Citrus Central Expressway Corporation. San Miguel Foundation Incorporated. Max Pro Northern Cement, lamang ka dito. Petron Corporation, SMC Global Power, San Miguel Aero City Incorporated, Bank of Commerce, an affiliate of San Miguel Corporation. We think customers. We are IT Philippines Incorporated. China Bank, your success is our business.
Protect yourself and loved ones. Use Protect Plus Gold, a broad-spectrum disinfectant that kills 500 strains of bacteria, fungi, and viruses such as coronavirus and other disease-causing microorganisms. Also potent against viruses in pets. It kills 99.9% of disease-causing germs and works in 10 minutes. Dissolve 1 teaspoon in 1 liter of water. Apply on areas for disinfection or use it for misting. Protect Plus Gold.
Welcome back to the news. The UK announced plans to further relax its pandemic curbs on Tuesday, despite warning that the number of daily new cases is set to more than treble to reach 100,000. Here's Arian Celestino from our EBC UK Bureau to tell us more. Arian?
Hi, here is my update in the United Kingdom. The UK announced plans to further relax to its pandemic curbs on Tuesday, despite warning that the number of daily new cases is set to more than treble to reach 100,000. From August 16th, adults in England who have received both doses of a coronavirus vaccine will no longer need to self-isolate if they are in close contact with a positive case, Health Secretary Sajid Javid said. Instead, they will need to take a test and isolate only if they are found to be positive, he told Parliament. The same rules will apply to under 18s who are not yet receiving vaccinations in Britain, Javed added. The rules will come in ahead of the return to school for the September term after months in which entire classes have been sent home to the fury of parents. The health minister was updating MPs a day after Prime Minister Boris Johnson revealed plans to lift most of England's coronavirus restrictions, including face masks and social distancing from July 19th, urging personal responsibility rather than government edict. The UK's other nations, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, set their own health policy and are moving more slowly. Johnson had initially aimed for a full reopening on June 21st, but was forced to push back the date because of a surge in the highly contagious Delta variant. That variant now accounts for nearly all new COVID-19 cases in Britain, and daily infection rates have soared to nearly 30,000 in recent days. Javed said that figure was likely to reach 50,000 a day by July 19th and as high as 100,000 later in the summer. But the vaccination campaign has weakened the link with hospitalizations and deaths, he stressed to MPs, saying that inoculations are all wall of defense. More than 86% of adults in the UK have received at least one jab, with 64% fully vaccinated, according to National Health Service data. He also responded to media reports that 3 batches of the AstraZeneca jab made in India have not been approved for use in the EU, potentially hindering summer travel for British recipients of those doses. Britain has not been using the Covishield branded jab made by the Serum Institute of India, and the government is in intensive discussions with Brussels on the issue, Javed said. CJ.
Thank you, Arian. Just a quick question. Will there be changes expected when it comes to schools once the easing of restrictions are announced?
Yes, CJ, there may be changes, according to BBC. Education Secretary Gavin Williamson would make a decision that would stop bubbles from being sent home and contact isolation for pupils to reduce the impact on schools with COVID outbreaks. He also mentioned that the way forward is with testing rather than by sending bubbles home. This is because there have been too many young students missing school unnecessarily. England schools will be advised on how the government plans to ease the rules, which led to large numbers of students being sent home if one child has a positive COVID test. Last week, due to the bubble system, more than 375,000 children were sent home, which brought frustration to parents as they needed to balance work and childcare. Back to you, CJ.
Well, thank you, Arian, for your report. Please tell us more if there are going to be any more developments regarding this. Please take care.
Thank you for having me today. Reporting from the United Kingdom, I am Arian Celestino. We live in interesting times.
Still in the COVID situation now here in the country, Philippine Genome Center Executive Director Cynthia Saloma explained why the Lambda variant has become an emerging global public health risk. The new Lambda variant of the COVID-19, which has so far spread to 30 countries, has been declared a variant of interest by the World Health Organization. Let's listen in.
Bakit naman naging global public health risk itong Lambda variant? Kasi nga po, among the many countries around the world, yung Peru kung saan naitala una itong variant of interest na Lambda, pinakamataas po yung kanyang death rate, kumbaga yung deaths per million population, na siya po yung pinakamarami around the world. And simula po ng Abril, ang number of cases na or lineages ng SARS-CoV-2 na nasa ganitong lineage, lambda, mataas po. In fact, in April, maliit lang naman po kasi yung effort sa sequencing ng Peru, pero as many as 98% of their sequences in April was actually the Lambda variant, tapos sa May, mga 94%. Kaya kung titingnan mo, Yusek, di ba, ang dami ng cases, laganap yung Lambda variant sa Peru, at the same time, mataas po yung kanilang case fatality rate, at saka yung rate per death rate nila per million population, mga 5,700. So, kaya binabantayan talaga natin ito, ano? Pero kung as to whether or not it has increased, really increased transmissibility or gives more severe symptoms, wala pa po tayong sufficient data for that. For the variants of concern, it can be alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. Lahat po sila, meron namang mga evidence of some reduction in the neutralization ng ating mga antibodies. Sa lambda po, yung pinakamagong data na nakikita natin is a publication na hindi pa naman na-referee based on pseudovirus. Kumbaga sa laboratory experiments nila, nakikita nila na mayroon tendency increase transmissibility itong ating lambda variant at mayroon din siyang immune evasion. Kumbaga yung mga antibodies that were collected from people who have been previously infected or have been vaccinated, medyo bumaba po compared sa wild type or the B6140 variant. So simula pa mga early February, March, lahat po ng mga VOIs and VOCs, tsaka yung may mga mutations sa mga regions ng spike protein, binabantayan po natin yan. So sa ating nearly 8,000, mga 7,800 na nating whole genome sequences simula po ng Enero, wala pa po tayo nakita ni isang C.7 variant.
Staying here in the Philippines, it is still too early to put a timetable on when COVID-19 restrictions will be lifted, as the country has yet to vaccinate a large part of its population. That according to the Defense Secretary Delphine Lorenzana. Take a look.
Hirap pang maglagay ng timetable ngayon o timeline kung kailan natin i-lift yung restrictions, dahil unang-una, tulad ng sinabi ni Cabsec Nograles, hindi pa malaking numero yung ating nabakunahan at hindi pa tayo makaka-acquire ng herd immunity. Ngayon, lahat kami doon sa IATF, gusto rin naming matanggal yung restriction dahil nakikita naman natin ang paghihirap ng mga mamamayan. Kaya lang, dapat tayo makinig sa mga eksperto, sa mga doktor, mga expert niyan, at alam nila yung mga ang characteristics nitong mga virus na to. Hindi lang basta namin sinasabing lockdown, kundi kinokonsulta namin sila. So
The Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases is implementing 4 quarantine classifications: the strictest, enhanced community quarantine or ECQ, modified ECQ, general quarantine or community quarantine, and the most relaxed modified GCQ. The National Capital Region and the provinces of Rizal and Bulacan are under GCQ with some restrictions, while the provinces of Cavite and Laguna are under GCQ with heightened restrictions from July 1 to 15.
To Thailand now, where the Phuket Provincial Public Health Office Chief Dr. Kusak Kukitikon has confirmed that the province has marked its first Phuket sandbox tourists infected with COVID-19. On Thursday, 249 passengers on flights from Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Singapore are expected to land on the island where sandy beaches have been relatively deserted since the virus hit. The kingdom is pinning high hopes for a much-needed revival on the so-called Phuket Sandbox, a model that will allow vaccinated travelers to visit without quarantine.
Indonesia expanded nationwide restrictions to combat its deadliest coronavirus wave. While many wealthy nations are lifting restrictions because of successful vaccination drives, the World Health Organization chief warned that the pandemic remains in a very dangerous phase. Take a look.
Because we're in a very dangerous period of this pandemic. In those countries with low vaccination coverage, terrible scenes of hospitals overflowing are again becoming the norm. But no country on earth is out of the woods yet. The Delta variant is dangerous and is continuing to evolve and mutate, which requires constant evaluation and careful adjustment of the public health response.
Indonesia today reported a daily record of 1,040 coronavirus deaths, while fresh infections topped 34,000. On Wednesday, the government expanded restrictions across Indonesia after earlier clampdowns on the capital, Jakarta, and some other areas. The wider restrictions include forcing the majority of non-essential employees to work from home, as well as limiting shop and restaurant hours. The Muslim-majority country's mosques and churches were also closed in the highest risk areas. The new restrictions would apply to dozens of cities and extend across the vast archipelago nation of nearly 270 million people, which has been hammered by the highly infectious Delta variant that was first detected in India. The country's hospitals are buckling under the pressure as a wave of sick patients flood the overwhelmed healthcare system.
And Delta-fueled outbreaks have also led to the imposition of restrictions in Australia, including in its biggest city, Sydney, where lockdown orders on more than 5 million residents were on Wednesday extended by at least another week.
When it comes to determining the length of the lockdown. And that's why the New South Wales government, based on the health advice, which is our key indicator, made the difficult decision to announce the extension of the lockdown and the existing restrictions in the regions for 1 week further until Friday midnight, the 16th of July. Now, the reason for this is, as we've been saying, this Delta strain is a game changer. It's extremely transmissible and more contagious than any other form of the virus that we've seen.
As mentioned, the lockdown is now expected to end on Friday, July 16. Australia's COVID-0 approach has seen a series of snap lockdowns in cities across the country and its international borders closed for the last 15 months. The strategy has allowed Australians to live relatively normally throughout the pandemic while avoiding the high death toll seen around the world. Since the pandemic began, Australia has detected just over 30,000 virus cases and reported 910 deaths. But there are growing questions about how long the country can continue to fend off the virus and remain cut off from the rest of the world. The Sydney outbreak has so far seen just 357 cases, underscoring the strictness of the strategy.
The Tokyo Olympics, already delayed by a year, also remain plagued by coronavirus fears, with authorities and organizers trying to find ways to safely host one of the biggest sports events in the world just over 2 weeks before it begins. Officials announced Wednesday that the Olympic torch relay had been scrapped on Tokyo's road to prevent crowds. And with infections on the rise, the government is expected to extend restrictions this week that will likely affect the number of fans that can attend Olympic events. The Olympic flame arrives in Tokyo on Friday, but private torch lighting ceremonies will replace the relay across the capital to prevent crowds gathering to watch, according to the city government. Right up to the opening ceremony on July 23, the torch ceremonies will be streamed online, with authorities urging spectators to watch them in the comfort of their homes.
And now the Japanese government plans to impose a virus state of emergency in Tokyo during the Olympics, according to reports. meaning spectators could be barred from venues. The emergency measures, less strict than a blanket lockdown, will be enforced until August 22, several Japanese media outlets reported, following a rise in cases less than 3 weeks before the games begin. Kyodo News, citing a senior government official, said it was now likely that the Olympics would be held behind closed doors. The pandemic postponed 2020 games will take place under strict anti-infection rules, with overseas fans already banned. Organizers set a limit last month of 10,000 fans, or half of each venue's capacity, but recently warned that a fully closed-door games remained an option as the virus situation worsens. Participants have already begun arriving in Japan, with 11,000 Olympic athletes from around 200 countries set to take part.
But in London, the Euro 2020 football tournament semi-finals and finals are set to be held this week, with 60,000 fans permitted at Wembley Stadium, despite Britain facing a new surge in infections. Mass vaccinations, however, have stopped a resultant surge in hospital admissions or deaths. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has announced the end of most virus restrictions, such as face masks and indoor social distancing in England. Other UK nations, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, are moving more slowly. Meanwhile, London Mayor Sadiq Khan announced that young Londoners getting their first vaccine jabs this week will be entered in a draw to win tickets for the Euro 2020 football final. The incentive comes as the vaccine rollout is now targeting those aged 18 and over, and England are in the last four and on the verge of their first major championship final and trophy since 1966. The final date will be played at London's Wembley Stadium on Sunday. The government is in a race against time to jab as many people as possible to slow the rapid spread of the Delta variant as the economy reopens.
Malaysians struggling to make ends meet during a worsening coronavirus outbreak have hoisted a white flag outside their homes in a desperate plea for help that has swept the country. Authorities imposed a second strict nationwide lockdown last month in response to a surge in COVID cases, and many low-income workers who live hand-to-mouth have lost their jobs again after a ban on non-essential businesses. Take a look.
A phenomenon that underlies desperation. Desperation where the expectation is, the aspiration is that people in the community or NGOs in the community support each other. So what we try to do in responding to the white flag phenomenon in Klang is we provide a balanced diet, meaning that we can provide food for at least about 7 or 8 days, and with a smaller family, maybe about 10 days. And we support that with vegetables and fish as well. And I can tell you, lots of Malaysian families are in distress at this time, lots and lots of them.
Now, the flags, often more than strips of cotton or T-shirts, have sprung up outside homes of the needy around the country in the past week, prompting an outpouring of sympathy and donations from the public. Members of the public are bringing food to households that have signaled their distress, while businesses are also donating, with a noodle maker sending workers to deliver food in worst-hit Selangor State outside Kuala Lumpur. Popular Malaysian rapper Ultimate also pledged to donate food in a message to his nearly 400,000 Instagram followers. Only essential businesses such as supermarkets and medical clinics have been allowed to operate since last month. Growing desperation is reflected in rising suicides, and police recorded more than 450 in the first 5 months of this year, compared to 631 for all of 2020. Referring to the figures, Malaysia's top health official, Nur Hisham Abdullah, said the pandemic had a huge impact on people's mental health, especially those cut off from support networks of friends and family. Meanwhile, there is little sign of Malaysia's latest outbreak slowing despite the lockdown. Officials reported over 7,600 cases and more than 100 deaths on Tuesday.
London's Heathrow Airport said Wednesday it plans to offer fast-track lanes for fully vaccinated arriving passengers as the UK government winds down its pandemic curbs. The government is expected Thursday to announce that travelers coming to England from amber countries or the middle ranking for COVID incidents covering most of Europe will no longer have to quarantine. In advance, Heathrow said it was launching a pilot for passengers coming from selected destinations to enter an immigration fast track on arrival after showing proof they have received both doses of a coronavirus vaccine. Heathrow Chief Executive John Holland Kay said this pilot will allow us to show that pre-departure and arrival checks of vaccination status can be carried out safely at check-in so that fully vaccinated passengers can avoid quarantine from July 19. July 19 is, of course, the government's target date for lifting most of pandemic restrictions in England, although many scientists are worried about the plan as infection rates soar from the more contagious Delta variant. The Heathrow trial will initially cover passengers flying in on selected flights from Athens, Los Angeles, Montego Bay in Jamaica, and New York. Health Secretary Sajid Javid on Tuesday said people in England who have been double jabbed as well as under 18s will no longer have to self-isolate if they have been in contact with someone who tests positive for COVID-19. Eagle News will be back with more updates. Please don't go away.
This program is supported by Magnolia Incorporated. Magnolia ready-to-cook fried chicken. Worry-free na on your next family meal. Yan ang alagang Magnolia. Pure Food Standard Juicy Hot Dog. Walang duda, kids can tell na #1 ang Pure Food Standard Juicy Hot Dog. Sandig sugar-free white coffee. Sarap ng white coffee, now sugar-free. B-Mag Premium and ProTac Plus Gold. SMC Infrastructure and Skyway Stage 3 Citrus Central Expressway Corporation. San Miguel Foundation Incorporated. Max Pro Northern Cement. Lamang ka dito. Petron Corporation. SMC Global Power. San Miguel Aero City Incorporated. Bank of Commerce, an affiliate of San Miguel Corporation. We think customers. We are IT Philippines Incorporated. China Bank, your success is our business.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back. President Duterte has admitted that he is sold on the idea of joining the 2022 vice presidential race. The president made the admission during his meeting with the Partido Demokratikong Pilipino Lakas ng Bayan or PDP Laban executives and other government officials at the Malacanang's Malago Clubhouse in Manila on Monday night. Let's listen in.
I am touched by the outpouring of sentiments, at least yung grupo sa PDP, urging me to run for Vice President. I remember that I made a statement a few days ago because of the incessant attacks on my person na kung anong pinagsasabi. Out of the blue, lumabas yung ano ko sa utak na kung ganito lang pala na babawiin ninyo ako, ano pa kaya kung yung wala na ako sa presidente. Pero yung inaatake ka, tapos with the statement of Pacquiao, to the proposition that I ran for Vice President, medyo I'm sold to the idea. So, meaning to say, I am seriously thinking of running for Vice President. But let me dwell into the reality of things. Kailangan kaibiganin ko yung presidente.
President Rodrigo Duterte has told Chief Presidential Legal Counsel Salvador Panelo to take action on former Senator Antonio Trillanes IV's latest plunder allegations against him. Duterte made the instruction after Panelo slammed Trillanes' rehashed claim that Duterte and his former longtime aide and now Senator Christopher Lawrence Go used their influence to corner about 6.6 billion pesos worth of government infrastructure projects. Trillanes, in a video uploaded on YouTube, accused Duterte and Go of committing plunder over public works contracts won by construction firms owned by Go's family in the Davao region. He said construction companies owned by Go's family had won government projects worth as much as 6.6 billion pesos, specifically 1.5 billion pesos when Duterte was still Davao City mayor and 5.1 billion in the first 2 years of his presidency. He revived the plunder allegations against Duterte after Duterte challenged Senator Manny Pacquiao to name and probe government offices accused of being involved in corruption. Take a look.
Si Trillanes, Pacquiao yan. They want to, hold power because they must have, may nakita siguro silang magandang oportunidad nila para sa kanila.
And finally, in our news, it might not make the cut for Olympians at Tokyo 2020, but millions perform a stretching routine each day in Japan's parks, schools, and offices. Dating back over a century, the tradition is known as radio taiso. Take a look.
結構こうストレッチも効いてますし、体が朝から伸びて、スムーズに関節も動くようになって。
そうですね。やはりラジオ体操しないと、なんかちょっと気分が乗らなかったり、体がちょっとなまってたりするところも分かんなかったりするので、非常に大事だと思ってます。
腕を回しましょう。体の
テレワークが多くなって孤独感を感じる人もいたと思うのですが、ラジオ体操をすることで1日1回顔を合わせることができるので、そういったことからも心身の健康のためにもラジオ体操を始めました。
That's very good.
I know.
Psychologically, mentally, it's good. Yeah.
I should do that before I go to sleep tonight. That's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. Please see us back tomorrow.
I'll join you online.
Let's do that.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back tomorrow. I'm Alma Angeles, and
we
live in interesting times.
This program is supported by Protect Plus Gold, a broad-spectrum disinfectant, kills 99.9% of disease-causing germs and works in 10 minutes.